the incumbents or the regime media or the legacy media, there's different ways to call them, when they lament the destruction of the industry, that's a solipsistic view. They're the center of the world. Hey, why aren't people reading my newspaper? Why aren't people watching my? Well, they're not watching. They're just watching other stuff, often from things that are shared on social networks. That's why Bill C-63 was the inevitable. I mean, C-11 was a bill that gave Trudeau dominion over the internet. It was the gateway. It was his standing. Until C-11 was passed, Trudeau could regulate TV and radio stations, but the internet was free. C-11 put him in charge of the internet. It was terrifying. C-18, the Online News Act, basically wrung out Google to bring another $100 million a year to purse out to journalist organizations that Trudeau's government licenses, the Qualified Canadian Journalism Organizations. We were rejected for our application. So C-11 gave him dominion over the internet. C-18 gave $100 million to share with his favorite companies. But C-63, that's the hammer. By the way, look at that. 3 bills in a row, 3 bills in the course of a year. He doesn't have 3 bills on the economy, 3 bills on inflation, 3 bills on housing. He's obsessed with censorship. It's what he cares about most. This is the one that scares me because there's new criminal law in here. I don't think they're going to go after you or me with criminal law. I don't think that either you or Rebel News does anything so insanely shocking that it would attract a criminal remedy. But I think the poison pill or the secret weapon in C-63 is to allow anyone in the country, whether they're a citizen or not, by the way, to file a complaint with the Human Rights Tribunal alleging that any social media post is likely to expose a person to detestation, which is so vague. It's a feeling, it's an emotion. Hate is a feeling, just like love is a feeling, an emotion. And you can file this complaint for free. You can have your identity as a complainant kept secret, even from the person you're complaining about. If you win your complaint, you get up to $20,000 from the target, plus they could have to pay $50,000 in fines. And this is for every single incident, and the law specifically says it's for your historic work too, if it's still online. So my great fear is that every tweet, every Facebook post, every YouTube video, all of which are called social media, could be the subject of a nuisance complaint, hundreds, thousands, literally every day. It could be the same person complaining. It could be a professional activist funded by Trudeau who's complaining. It most likely will be. And even if theoretically you were to, quote, win 100 of these, that's just taken up so much of your time and money and stress. The process is the punishment. I see C-63 as the rebel killer, as the True North killer, as the citizen journalist killer, because it doesn't even rely on a government prosecutor. It basically deputizes every whiner, every woke person in the country who used to just grumble. Now they've got a $20,000 incentive to file a complaint with the Human Rights Tribunal, and even if they lose, there's no skin off their nose. I think C-63 is the final chapter in this 3-part play to come and kill independent journalism. What do you think?
Well, you explained it a heck of a lot better than I could in those details. It's truly terrifying, Ezra. And I think that you're right. If Justin Trudeau had his way, that is what they would do. My only sliver of hope or silver lining, perhaps, is that I think that enough people at this point see through it. You see civil liberties organizations on both sides. You have the former chair of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal come out and say that he thinks this is all deliberate and that really it's chilling. I just don't think that they're going to be able to do it in the way that they want to. I can't imagine that they're going to, they're still in a minority situation. They need support of the NDP. I think that a lot of people have raised the opposite angle, which is that this can be gamed and manipulated by either side. So you could very easily go against the Palestinian activists that we see making, deranged, crazy genocidal statements online, and it could be weaponized against them. I kind of hold out some hope that there's some sensible people who are going to stop this. I'd love to hear your take, Ezra. Do you think that this bill is going to actually pass and get implemented as it is currently being proposed and written?
I respect your point of view, and I'm very glad to hear it, but I do disagree with you. I note that Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau renewed their vows in their coalition right before this bill was introduced. And I don't know if that's a coincidence. I think Jagmeet Singh and actually the Bloc Québécois have both stated their desire to renovate the Human Rights Act to have the hate speech provision. You might recall Stephen Harper's government removed the hate speech provision a decade ago, precisely because it was abused in this way. So I'm afraid that, and I hear what you're saying. You're saying, well, what happens if this is weaponized against the left? I don't think it will be. And even if it is, those will be dismissed because the people who operate the machinery of the censorship tribunals, they're woke activists too. They say things like it's impossible to be racist against white males, for example. So they would not accept. They would say in the Marxist dialectic, they would say critical theory. A Palestinian protester can never be wrong because they're the oppressed, and an oppressor can never be right. So I worry that you're using common sense that is absent in the human rights censorship industry. I fear that Trudeau and the NDP and probably the Bloc will ram this through. I fear that the Senate will approve it. There might be a couple of holdouts there, but Trudeau has such a dominant majority. I fear that this will become law. I think that if it goes to law the way it is now, well, I'll tell you right now, Rebel News, I've already been talking with lawyers about as soon as it's legally possible, we intend to challenge it. You can't challenge a law that's not on the books yet and that hasn't been implemented yet. So it may be a while before we can fight it. But I really think this is an extinction level event for independent journalists. Why wouldn't hunter-killer groups like the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, which gets hundreds of thousands of dollars from Trudeau specifically to hunt and complain about conservatives, why wouldn't they just say, oh, okay, good. Let's file 10 complaints a day all year. That's 3,500 complaints a year. Even if only 1% of them get through, that's 35 direct hits. That's $70,000 or $700,000 in damages against Rebel News or True North. And we've burned up 1,000 hours of their time. Like, this is, if they do it, and why wouldn't they do it? Why are they doing it in the first place? They're not doing it because there's public demand for censorship. They're not doing it because Canada is a typhoon of right-wing hate. There's hate in Canada. It's the Gaza hate marches, but Trudeau's fine with that. They are doing this to snuff out the last 3 candles in the room, Candice. That's my view.
Well, I hopefully not be so pessimistic. I can see what you're happening, and I can see that dystopian sort of end of free speech, end of media, end of Canada discussion there, because I think you're right that this bill has the potential to do that. But I'm just going to hold out hope that enough people will raise their very valid concerns, that the reasonable people in the room, in the Liberal Party, in the media, the few of them that are left, are going to speak out loud enough and hopefully stop this. And again, worst case scenario, hopefully we're going to have an election soon, within the next year or year and a half. And I would imagine that this would be one of the first things that an opposition government, conservative government opposition party would vow to eliminate. So I hope it doesn't get to the points that you're pointing out. I do think that is possible. It's probably exactly what Trudeau had in mind when he was drafting this piece of legislation. They were so sneaky about it, right? They came out and they basically only talked about protecting kids, how the entire point was to protect kids. All the people at the press conference when the Justice Minister announced the bill were all just talking about these kids that had been sexploited online and how terrible it was. And I think most Canadians can agree with that. Like, little kids shouldn't be viewing porn and accessing porn online. And, there's all kinds of things that are needed. It's kind of laughable that we're supposed to believe that the Liberal Party are the ones that care about kids and protecting kids. Well, out of the other side of their mouth, they're also promoting, transing, mutilating, self-sterilizing procedures against little kids. You have Paul Bernardo, who was a rapist and a murderer of young women and girls. And he's, in a medium security prison playing ice hockey and playing tennis, under the liberal regime. And we're supposed to think that they are the ones that care about kids. This is obviously a Trojan horse. They're trying to, like you say, really put a damper on free speech. The whole concept of hate speech is so murky. I think there's so many problematic elements, but again, I'll try to just remain optimistic that a country like Canada won't let it happen, and that there's enough state safe gaps in place that we will stop this, or we will overturn it very quickly after it gets implemented, I hope.
Well, I hope you're right. And of course, I do believe that if Pierre Poilievre were to become prime minister, this law would be repealed if it were passed.